The invisible lens. How your mind shapes reality. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that every decision you've ever made, every belief, every opinion, every fact you were sure about might have been filtered through invisible mental distortions, not because you're irrational or careless, but because your brain, by design, bends reality to keep you sane, efficient, and comfortable. These distortions are called cognitive biases. They're the quiet editors of our thoughts, rewriting reality in ways we rarely notice. A cognitive bias is a shortcut in thinking. Your brain uses it to process the endless flood of information you face every second. Instead of analyzing every detail rationally, it relies on patterns and heuristics, mental rules of thumb that save time but sometimes lead us astray. They evolved to protect us from danger and overwhelm. But in the modern world, they often distort how we see truth, people, and even ourselves. For example, think of confirmation bias, our tendency to notice and believe information that agrees with what we already think and ignore what doesn't. It's the reason conspiracy theories persist, why arguments escalate, and why we can't always see our blind spots. It's not malice, it's efficiency. The brain protects its current worldview the same way a body protects its heartbeat. When you realize how biases shape your mind, you start to question what seeing clearly even means. Every perception might be a mosaic built from assumptions. Every opinion a reflection of invisible influences. Yet, these biases also give structure to chaos. They help us make decisions quickly and survive uncertainty. It's unsettling to know that the brain you trust most is also the one tricking you. But maybe that's the paradox of being human, to live through illusions while constantly seeking truth. So, if our minds constantly bend reality, which illusions are we living in right now? Let's look at one of the most powerful and persuasive of them all, the illusion of confidence, the confidence mirage. When certainty feels safer than truth, picture two people debating a topic. One is calm, uncertain, and careful with words. The other speaks with unwavering confidence, as if the truth is carved into their bones. Who do you believe? Most of us instinctively side with the confident one, even when they're wrong. This is the overconfidence bias, the mental habit of mistaking certainty for accuracy. The overconfidence bias makes us overestimate our knowledge, underestimate risks, and assume control over outcomes we can't actually predict. It's the reason investors lose fortunes, gamblers chase losses, and everyday people feel sure about things they barely understand. In ancient times, this might have been useful. Confidence could inspire leadership and action. But today, it can blind us to nuance and error. Think of the Dunning-Kruger effect, a form of overconfidence bias where people with little knowledge overestimate their competence, while experts often underestimate theirs. The less you know, the more you think you know, because ignorance leaves no room for doubt. The mind prefers the comfort of certainty over the discomfort of confusion. This bias creates a strange paradox. The world's loudest voices often come from those least aware of their ignorance, while the wisest minds remain hesitant, constantly questioning themselves. True understanding may not come from certainty, but from comfort with doubt. When you let go of the need to be right, you start to see how much more there is to learn. But confidence isn't the only illusion shaping your choices. There's another, quieter one, a bias that decides what you see, remember, and even believe to exist. The spotlight illusion, why you see what you expect to see. Imagine walking through a crowded city street. Faces blur, sounds overlap, but one thing catches your attention. Someone wearing the same jacket as you. For a brief second, it feels meaningful. That's your mind's selective attention at work, guided by a bias that highlights what feels relevant to you and dims everything else. This bias, often related to the availability heuristic and attentional bias, makes us notice what's familiar or emotionally charged. Your brain can't process everything at once, so it filters reality like a camera lens. The brighter something shines in your mental spotlight, the darker the background becomes. It's why when you buy a new car, you suddenly notice it everywhere, or why people who fear danger see more threats than safety. The mind organizes chaos by making the world confirm your inner state. What you focus on expense. If our attention shapes perception, then we are not just seeing the world, we are creating it. Reality becomes subjective, not because facts change, but because awareness does. It raises a haunting question. If your perception defines what you notice, then how much of your life has been shaped by what you didn't see? Every bias leaves blind spots. Maybe our entire worldview is just a carefully lit stage, with truth waiting in the shadows. So far, we've seen how our mind tricks us into false confidence and selective perception. But what about memory? The one thing we trust to define who we are. Let's explore how even your past isn't as solid as it seems. The memory trap, how your past rewrites itself. Think of your earliest memory, the smell, the sound, the feeling. Now ask yourself, are you sure it happened exactly that way? Memory feels like a photograph, but in reality, it's more like a painting, one that your mind keeps touching up every time you revisit it. This is memory bias, and it's one of the most quietly unsettling truths about consciousness. Memory bias occurs because each time you recall an event, you're not retrieving it, you're reconstructing it. The mind fills in missing details, smooths contradictions, and adapts your memories to fit your current beliefs. Over time, the version you remember may have little to do with what actually happened. Psychologists call this the reconstruction hypothesis. It explains why eyewitness accounts differ, why nostalgia softens pain, and why trauma can distort timelines. Your brain isn't lying, it's editing reality to maintain a coherent story. If memory is fluid, then identity itself becomes uncertain. Who you think you are, your story, your past, your growth might be built on selective reconstructions. Maybe we aren't who we were, but who we remember ourselves to be. And if that's true, then memory isn't a record of the past, but an act of creation. This realization is both freeing and frightening. You're not bound to your past, but you also can't fully trust it. The mind, in its effort to protect you, reshapes time itself. But even beyond memory, one final bias rules them all, one that hides in your sense of self. It shapes not what you see, but who you believe you are. The ego bias, when the mind protects its favorite illusion. Every thought you have starts with a quiet assumption that you are the thinker. But what if the you behind the thought is also a bias, a mental construct designed to make sense of consciousness? The ego bias, also called the self-serving bias, filters reality in your favor. It credits you for success, blames others for failure, and edits your story so that you're always the main character. This bias evolved to maintain psychological stability. The mind can't handle total objectivity. It needs a narrative center. The ego keeps you motivated, hopeful, and resilient, but it also blinds you to your flaws. When things go wrong, it shields you with rationalizations. When things go right, it feeds you validation. It's the reason people find it hard to apologize, admit ignorance, or truly empathize. The ego insists on being right, even when truth would set you free. Understanding this bias feels like stepping outside yourself. You realize the self isn't fixed. It's a constantly edited identity, shaped by memory, emotion, and belief. This doesn't make it meaningless. It makes it flexible. Once you see the illusion, you can hold your ego lightly, not as a prison, but as a useful mask. In that realization lies a strange peace, the awareness that you don't have to conquer your biases to be free. You only have to see them. Awareness itself begins to dissolve their power. As you close your eyes tonight, remember, your mind is both the artist and the canvas. Every bias is a brushstroke shaping the world you see. Seeing through the mind's mirror, the journey through cognitive biases isn't about escaping illusion. It's about becoming aware of it. When you realize how your brain edits reality, you stop chasing certainty and start embracing curiosity. The goal isn't to erase bias, but to recognize its fingerprints on your thoughts. So as you drift to sleep, imagine your mind as a quiet mirror, one that reflects not truth, but perspective. And somewhere beyond those reflections, behind the noise of bias and belief, lies something deeper: awareness itself, that silent observer who notices the thinking, the feeling, the remembering, untouched by all distortions. Maybe that's the real you. Rest in that awareness and let the illusions fade.